Well, our reporter Linda Mnisi has been covering this trial for us. He joins us for more on this evening's, on the day's proceedings, rather. Linda, good evening to you. Firstly, you know, this is the first time that we're getting a sense of what may have possibly happened on the night that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. It's through the perspective of a close friend, somebody who was on the scene. It's a description of what was really a frantic evening, including a frantic rush to hospital as they attempted to save Senzo Meyiwa's life.
Yes, indeed, Kathy. He details how, you know, when he came out from that bedroom that he was hiding in, he found Senzo Meyiwa, you know, in a certain position between the TV stand as well as the couch, and on the couch was Kelly Khumalo's mother. He says at that point when he came out, people had already started screaming. They were calling Senzo's name. It was at that point when they picked him up and put him in the vehicle with the help of the community or some of the people who had already arrived at the scene. They took him to hospital. He even goes as far, Kathy, as describing how the sitting arrangement inside the car, saying that Senzo's head was on his lap, and then between, and the next person who was sitting next to him was Mthokozis, who also happens to be Senzo Meyiwa's friend, and then on the right was Kelly Khumalo's sister, Zandi. Kelly Khumalo herself was driving to the hospital, and he goes on to describe how, you know, the nurse at the hospital, after wheeling Senzo into the hospital, asked about, you know, who the elderly person was amongst them. Kelly Khumalo's mother, being at the hospital at the time, was the one to receive the news that Senzo Meyiwa had died.
One can imagine in a moment like that there is so much that is up in the air. And, you know, he's been asked specifically about the moments at which he knew that Senzo was gone.
Yes, indeed. He speaks about how, you know, Kelly Khumalo's mother comes back crying and telling them that Senzo Meyiwa had died, and at that point they all started crying and asked to see him. It's where he described that they were taken into a room where he was laying on the stretcher. Senzo Meyiwa, that is, was laying on the stretcher and covered. And at that point, of course, you know, they all really started crying. And he also says that later they were also given an opportunity to view his body. He says it's at that point where he kissed him on the forehead, and Kelly Khumalo then took off his watch that he had been wearing at the time. He says leaving that room, there were already a number of people who had started gathering at the hospital, including Orlando Pirates players. You'll remember Senzo Meyiwa was a soccer star, was an Orlando Pirates player. His fellow teammates were already at the hospital, and it was at that point where chaos, he says, you know, ensued. He, you know, speculates that at the time it was probably Kelly Khumalo as well as Mandisa who were having a go at each other, because there was a hair on the ground. He says there were braids on the hospital floor just next to the glass door. And
you talk about Mandisa. Is this now a reference to Senzo Meyiwa's wife? What do we know about how she ended up at the hospital?
Well, according to Tumelo, it's unclear how Mandisa, you know, ended up at the hospital. This is indeed Senzo Meyiwa's wife, because he says he himself does not know how she ended up at the hospital. When they emerged from that particular room, what they saw was, of course, you know, Mandisa, who was there, and then Kelly Khumalo and Mandisa had a go at each other. That's when the hair issue came about. But it was interesting how also, Kathy, you know, towards the end of the proceedings today, he was asked about, you know, the intruders and the description, as he says, that they had an opportunity to, you know, go to the police station to detail and describe the intruders who came into the house. And he says it was at that point where he described this short man who had dreadlocks and big eyes, who came into the house and was carrying a gun. It was the only opportunity that he really had to detail, you know, how this intruder looked like, because the first identity parade, he says, you know, was really was unsuccessful for him because he could not recognize any of the people. And it was quite interesting how the state then tried to have him do a doc identification, to which the defense really objected to, saying that procedurally they were not doing things right. Let's take a listen to that moment.
Now, are you able to recognize any of the accused before court?
No objection.
Please.
There are no basis for that.
Yes. As a court pleases, my lord, we've just laid the basis. The witness has indicated that he did not attend any identification parade after the suspects, the current suspects, were arrested.
As a court, this is your lordship. The state is maneuvering, is misleading, the state is confusing the witness. And the witness never said he didn't attend any ID parade after the accused were arrested. He said he attended only one ID parade. And the state should have followed up on that question.
My Lord, can I also add? Thank you, my Lord. My Lord, the last question that was put to the witness: after the current suspects were arrested, did you attend any ID parade? And the answer was no. There is no other ID parade except the one I attended. There is no mention of the identity of the suspect or the accused who are before this court.
All right, and of course we're expecting that evidence by Tumelo Madlala will continue in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial.